about time that we get underway with our first series. We've got LucifroN versus Elazer. We open up with Broken Crown.
Oh, Nate, this is going to be awesome. So we start with a map that everyone's played. We start with a map that has been 80% probably of the ladder going into this test early on, all the way through. We had a couple days of Jag and Ma. We had a couple days of Secluded Grove.
The dark times. We had the dark times. Yes, yes.
See, I'm lucky. I was doing IEM Katowice, so I actually didn't play on those maps. So I don't get to be too sad about it, I guess. But yeah, Broken Crown for map 1, Nate.
Yeah, it definitely. Going back to Broken Crown this is the bread and butter map. Like you said, this is where the majority of the experience is, and the expectations here is that you have all the options to be aggressive early on with some of the tree paths if that's what you want to do. Don't necessarily have to. There's a couple of different choices for where that third base gets taken. And what I really want to know is how hard we see either one of these players lean on the tech side of things, or if we do see more of a metered approach, since it's going to be that best of 5. Do we get a temperature check in game 1? These are the things I'm curious about, BeoMulf, as we load in and get ready to go into Broken Crown to kick this off. Best of 5s in Stormgate. We are here, ladies and gentlemen, in the top right. As the red Infernal, we have Elazer, and in the bottom left, as the blue Vanguard, we have LucifroN. But yeah, BeoMulf, this should just be a banger of a matchup. These two guys absolutely been a blast to watch. Been watching all day in that last round, and seeing their prowess come out has been impressive.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of cool as we look at what's happening earlier on. This is pretty early ore take, or a pretty early Therium coming out of Elazer, and you might say, look, this is inefficient, right? You're going to want to go and you want to mine as much Illuminite as possible because that gives you your vaults, it gives you your conclaves, gives you your natural. But this scout can be really annoying. So Elazer, he's going to mine out just enough to go and get, as we see right there, just enough to get that first gaunt out, then pull away a little bit. And on this understanding that he's playing this incredible player in LucifroN who can be active and can do things, he wants to make sure he gets that first gaunt out. He wants to make sure he gets that second gaunt out as quickly as possible so he can start to establish the map control and do what he wants to. But on the flip side, off this map control the dog gives you early, this is a very quick command post first coming out of LucifroN, making sure that, yeah, the economy of Infernals scales really nicely into 3 and 4 bases, but at the very least, he's going to get ahead just a little bit early as we, 90 seconds in.
There's no easy way to heal that gaunt from the early poke, and he's staying in his face. You're not really trying to contest map control since he wants to go for the fast expand build, like you pointed out. And that economy for Elazer doesn't scale into anything that can do anything really meaningful against this sort of opener, because most of the time for the Infernal early game, once you get that early pressure off, right, it becomes a lot about getting those camps, getting a little bit of the Fiend Snowball and those resources. So LucifroN feeling confident to go for a very economic opener. He's got 5 workers on his Therium too. Have we seen the barracks start? Am I missing something? Am I missing something, Beo?
Nope, you just go Hornets and you say, buzz. You don't have anti-air, which is actually really true. The technically Gaunts, Nate, they technically shoot up, but
not really. I mean, they do, but do they though? Yeah.
If I throw a rock at an F-15, that's about what they do.
You could call that an anti-air attack. I suppose definition-wise, you'd be safe there, but would it be effective? Perhaps that's the question that we need to be asking. So he does have a couple of Gaunts. He's ready. He's chilling. And I guess for LucifroN, it's just you have to get to that tier, get to the command post, and then get the hangar bays out. So we'll see that move forward. How do you like Elazer's chances against this? Do we know a response that he likes for this type of strategy?
It's been rough, right? Elazer's played a ton, but I haven't had a chance to see a ton of his games. I've been trying to really spend my time seeing if I can find Parting's replays, because he really has been playing in the dark. But the way you want to handle this, I can't speak to Elazer playing this, but the way you want to handle this for the most part is, well, you're not going to get a greater, or you're not going to get a Shadow Spire up quickly. It's expensive. It's 50 Therium to knock that down, and then 50 ore for each Shadow Flyer on top of it. That's expensive. So instead, you just get a couple stones down, you get your turrets ready, and you withstand. And then you start to push your stones out a little bit more and take your third base and go from there. But the problem, because Elazer was afraid of the scout opening, notice he had the double conclave, he was hiding in his main base. He's not going to have imps on the map. He's not going to have any idea what LucifroN's going for. So this means there might be a Shroud Stone on the way now. We didn't see it earlier on, but there is, again, not a ton of anti-air. And with this first hit, now, of course, this has been scouted out, but this first hit with the shield on top means 5 or 6 Gaunts. They don't really fight this all that well.
No, and we also know, of course, that you get into those situations where you're trading, and then eventually the Vanguard energy, you get that shield comes into play, and we see it right there. So helps with the target firing down, and it may feel like, oh, this isn't how much pressure is this really doing? You're not getting the workers, etc. But that veterancy, we just saw the level up right as it used the return to hangar bay. So those early Hornets are just going to start to snowball a little bit, and that 20% attack speed increase every time it happens. Beo, that's worth a whole lot more than a little bit of Luminite.
That it is, and they start to snowball as well. You can bring in flocks from different angles and really start to be annoying with it. Now, for now, we're going to, of course, have Elazer. He's okay. He's got his third and fourth base on the way at the same time, which, you know, Hornets are great. They have been nerfed and nerfed again at certain points. So they don't do as much anti-ground damage as they used to. Ooh, nice snipe there on the Gaunt. So Elazer, while it's going to be a struggle to keep Gaunts alive, there's a lot of map control that LucifroN has right now. Hornets don't kill shrines all that quickly, so you don't really have to be afraid of that one. But this Doombringer is a little bit exposed. There's no defense in the main base. If LucifroN can get this, this is going to shut down. Yeah, just about.
That's huge. Oh,
no, it teleported elsewhere. It teleported to the natural to get on out. Very nice move there coming out of Elazer. Now, that's a cooldown, Nate, that you do have to be afraid of. But at the very least, that's 150 Therium investment that, for the moment, is not going to go down.
Yeah, and the tricky part with that too is because he can drop it down and let the Gaunts out. Obviously, they do a little bit less damage versus ground, but when it's in the air, it's not too many shots away. Tries to bait a little bit over towards the Gaunts. One of the Hornets getting very low, but the other side of this too is the healing aura is opened up, which it almost becomes that double-edged sword. So. Brings the Doombringer over to get res, but he swoops around back towards the natural. Two more Gaunts rallying forward are picked off, and that Therium in the natural, BeoMulf being ripped apart again. We really see here the Hornet is such a fast unit, and in Stormgate, that speed is not easy to find on a lot of these forces. So when you can take advantage of this and push that APM, he's got the third base up going behind this, has the mech bay out, fully saturated. This build starts to feel really tough from LucifroN. We do have expansions going up for Elazer, but where does he get an opportunity to do something beyond this point? It's so difficult to get out on the map when all those Hornets are constantly attacking.
I think the thing I talked about, how it's really expensive early on to get that Spire down, to add on the Shadow Flyers on top of it. But it does feel like something that you're going to eventually need. Gaunts, once Hornets get into good enough numbers, they really won't do all that much. And now we got the Vulcan drop as well coming on. And this is something that we saw LucifroN do early on, taking advantage of the fact that now they can hit. They have longer range. They can play from the low ground to the high ground and start to poke away at these Shroud Stones that are trying to zone things out. And Elazer, yeah, he's got 4 bases, Nate, but he can only mine from 3 of them. And he's spending Luminite. He's getting it canceled again and again. This is a pretty rough situation. As the Inferno player, your job is to get ahead economically early on because of how your economy scales and because of how powerful the late game Vanguard composition is. So shut down a base like this is a pretty significant problem.
I could not agree more. I mean, he's going to try and get something done with the Doombringer on the other side of the map, but it's important to point out Vulcans absolutely rip Gaunts to pieces. No problem at all. And Fiends are not really much of an issue for them. That counterattack is doing some nice damage, but dealing with this in your base is so tough. Actually, the Weaver comes out to pull the Vulcan up the ramp and isolate it. Elazer getting a little bit of momentum here for dealing with some of that, but does he still have enough on the ground to actually stop the Hornets that are in his base? It looks like they are returning back to LucifroN's expansion. He waited a little bit on the Bob overcharge, so not all of them are going to go down, but most of the ones mining Therium were, and we see here with the Fiend count, there's a little bit of pressure to stop the flow.
Yeah, now the nice thing about this as a Vanguard player is technically you have something like a recall, right? You have return to hangar, but the problem is they're locked to the hangar up until the point where they're healed all back up. So I'm not exactly sure how much HP was on those Hornets as LucifroN pulled them back, but he will stay alive. But this releases all the pressure that LucifroN was able to put on the other side. Elazer's now back to mining out of his natural. He's got his third base. He's got his fourth base mining. And the key thing is that he took the right side base before the left, which, I mean, that's not all that much, as the Hornets are going to continue to be so annoying here, again denying things. I love the evac as well. So what it's doing, Nate, you may be very well familiar with this. There's no Vulcan in this. There's no Atlas in this, but they can drop the mines on top of it. There's not going to be an easy chase, but these Hornets do have to retreat back home. They're getting very low, and they're all infested.
Yeah, as it's one of the sillier changes they made in this patch. I've been having a lot of fun with it as someone who enjoys Vulcan and Atlas dropping. But the evac, it used to have the anti-air mine on a 2-minute cooldown, and it was free, but not really super effective or easy to use. Also had a timed life. Now it's only, I think, 15 or 20 Luminite to place out of the evac. It's got a 20-second cooldown, and they last forever. So there's really no downside if you have the evac to just kind of moving it around, putting some of those mines in key locations, giving yourself a fallback position, because the mine itself may not kill everything on its own, but it does have the slow effect on the units that it hits. So if he ends up going into a bunch of shadow flyers or trying to catch him off guard with something like that out of the blue, it gives you a little bit of an insurance policy. You can kind of create space in a way. There's my dissertation, my TED talk on the evac mines, as I have been abusing many Infernal players on the ladder with them.
Nate, tell me, were you one of those gamers that really liked the old PDD as well? Is that kind of
oh yeah,
what we're
oh
dealing with
yeah.
here?
There's a reason I'm the battlecruiser guy, and it didn't start with the battlecruisers. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say.
And unfortunately, the Raven had to quote Nevermore, and things did change.
For some strategy players, it's about creating the box to put your opponent in. You know what I mean? Sometimes a little bit of that. Atlas drops are very fun in that way. He's got 5 Weavers here, so looking to make some big picks off anything that's on the ground, but also the amount of Shroud Stones he's had to invest in to hold the Hornets back is pretty comical to look at. So that the Vulcan count begins to ramp up.
Yeah, and I do like this. There's been I've seen a lot of discourse about mech versus bio. What do you want to go for? And it's not really a fair comparison, realistically, when we try to compare Stormgate to other compositions in other games, because again, it is its own game. But there's this obvious Lancer Vulcan Medtech is bio, or Lancer Exo Medtech is bio, Vulcan Atlas Hornet is mech. But really, you kind of want to do both. So we do see the biokinetics lab working back home. It's working on researching something. As this Doombringer can get nothing done here. It's just gonna get dove and killed. And with the healing camp as well. Yeah.
Just a huge shutdown, tons of EXP on the Hornets, and what you bring up is I find a really interesting point too, because when you're talking about those different types of compositions that you could be using, whether it is more of the biological units or the mechanical units, in certain other games you have to research upgrades, right? There's like 6 different upgrades just for attack and armor for those. But the interesting thing about Stormgate is that there's not really ever a bad time, quote unquote, to switch into the other side, because it's just a couple of researches that you really need to get. And beyond that, there's no level 1, then level 2, then level 3, where those units are just kind of out of the choice. You know what I mean? So that's for Stormgate anyway. I think it kind of makes that question more interesting, since mixing those units together can also be really strong. And I think we saw yesterday in the SC2 qualifier, at least, I saw a game where we had a lot of medtechs with the nanoswarm on it was like a medtech Vulcan army. And those, I feel, do a really good job of kind of challenging that traditional dynamic. You can really intermix these units in pretty interesting ways. It's kind of the fun part.
Yeah, I've seen some really cool pushes as well that goes Hornets into Medtechs, and you just drop Nanoswarm on the Hornets, and you shield up one of them.
Oh.
They're just not dying. It actually, if you establish the map control, if you establish that control on things, it actually gets pretty disgusting. But for now, Elazer feels confident to move on the map. He's got a Shroud Stone going down in the middle to drop that Shroud to give him that positional defense. And this army from Elazer, despite everything that LucifroN's been doing, Nate, this army is massive. Where's the splash?
He can't fit his. I was gonna say, he can't get his army through that, so there's not really much to deal with this. You expect the Magmadons are going to be able to buy all the space that he needs, but once the infest ball gets going, just look at this choke trying to get the army through. Immediately the Vulcan gets pulled in, so doesn't get to spend its time really attacking. It's just immediately grabbed, does get pulled back by the evac, so we see that micro coming into play. But this position, I mean, he put himself into BeoMulf, one of the worst choke points he really could have been in. And again, this is looking like a 300 supply army from Elazer against, and not necessarily a bad army from LucifroN, but maybe more like 100 army supply or 150 at best. It's just so much to have to take down. I don't know what he does here.
And we can see from that fight as well happening that suddenly there was a lot of animus. So we saw the map totally covered in Shroud, that 2%, effectively 2% healing on top of everything on top of this. And Shadow Flyers hit like 4 of the Hornets and knocked them down right at the very beginning of that fight. So this army that, well, LucifroN's been spending the last, what are we in, 13 minutes in of trying to build up, it's not there anymore. And yeah, LucifroN's going to be forced out after playing a pretty nice game one, to be totally honest. But Elazer holds on, he maxes out, and he hits him right where it hurts.
This is my absolute favorite part about Stormgate because, especially for Vanguard, there are so many fun builds that you watch somebody else do or you see in this tournament. And you're like, Hornets, really cool. And I was like, boom! I go in, you get the minions, you get a couple of the imps here, you get a couple of them there, but you're not necessarily taking down those units that you're not worried about, right? And we see that there still are a lot of Magmadons. There wasn't too much that really could have been done about the Weavers. Those are usually staying home until the big push is ready. But that's, I feel like, the hard part because he's kind of trading a little bit of his energy and a few of the Hornets for some of the Gaunts. But the Gaunts are so cheap that if you don't have that transition into the Mech Bay army, I just don't see how you make it happen without getting quite a few Atlases in there. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the goals when you go Hornets like this is to force your opponent to counter your air army and then to hit him with the transition. So you go 4 or 5 Hornets, then you go into Mass Lancer Exo. And then it's like, wow, great. You've got all these units that shoot up and you've built a ton of Gaunts and I'm going to cleave right through it. Or you do something like that. And unfortunately, as nice as it was that LucifroN was able to go and deny the natural mining for a time, and that was annoying, Elazer still got up to 4 bases pretty quickly. And the one time the Doomringer showed up on the other side of the map was enough to pull everything back and the pressure's released, and LucifroN never really got onto the other side of the map again. And well, if you're trying to play a pressure build and keep your opponent from building the right army, if they force you back, you can't really do that.
Yeah, and maybe the other interesting thing to consider too, in Stormgate, you need, for the Luminite saturation, it says out of 12, we know that up to 10 is where you get like the super hyper efficiency. So when you're killing a couple of workers here and there and you have all the shrines, as you mentioned, he still took the bases even if he lost some of the imps. But the charges, getting back up to that saturation, doesn't take maybe the same amount of time as you would expect in another game. So focusing a little too much on the economic harass and not being able to get any of the tech denied or take chunks out of the army, maybe that's something that we have to keep our eyes on in the future, because again, I feel like it's a little bit easier for either player, for Vanguard and Infernal. It feels like the economic harass is never too much to come back from if you have some units you can fight with.
It is always a trade-off though, because you do have that ability to boost up your production, right? Reset all the charges on any production structure, but generally we're going to see Infernal players going to spend that on shrines to get their imp count up. But that is 45 animus, or 40 animus. That is not getting you towards a Shroud-Stud manifestation defensively. That's not getting you towards, ideally, that big flayed dragon, that incredibly powerful unit. That means that you get more. That means that you get more themes. That you have this really nice anti-ground, anti-air, just about anti-everything. So it is a trade-off. It is something that you have to pay attention to. But when we see big fights like that at the very end, especially when you drop that top power skill that covers everything in Shroud, all of a sudden you get all the animus you want. So it's kind of it's funny, Nate, that it's a resource that you spend up until the point that you really don't have to worry about spending it.
Yeah, it's the energy snowball effect feels like that though. Like almost towards the end of the game, even for Vanguard, it feels like you just end up with a bunch. You're like, okay, well, you're starting to do the chrono boost thing almost, where you're like, okay, every time I get to the energy, I just need to spend it immediately because it eventually just feels like you have too much. But that's maybe one of the other fun things too. Maybe I'm more of a Vanguard player, but in the co-op too, for them, when you get the huge amounts of animus, it gets a little bit ridiculous. They don't have the dragon in there though, so we're still waiting on that.
I think you talk about having too much animus and things to spend it on. I think that Infernal should have the hog rush or whatever it's called in co-op.
That's awesome.
That should be a top bar ability. You know,
I'll take it. Yes, yes, please. Give me all of the most ridiculous stuff, and I still think the Infernal. I can't wait for the Infernal to get something like there's the hero has the spell that just turns the bodies of the nearby enemy units into like a monster. It's just awesome. Like very powerful fantasy type stuff, you know what I mean?
Wait.
Love to see it.
I heard you like free units. Now let me give you even further free units.
Well, they're not free. The other guy paid for them. Just to be clear, the other guy paid for them. They're not free, so we don't have to worry about that.
55 burgers and 55 fries, and everyone in front of me is paying for it. Yeah. Okay. I get what you're picking up here, Nate.
This is a good Saturday. BeoMulf. I appreciate you very much. There is the hangar bay complete for LucifroN. So we should be expecting those Hornets to come out yet again. No surprise there. And On this map, no less, Secluded Grove is a fun one. We usually see some interesting games here.
We really do. It's kind of interesting trying to figure out we actually, so I want to point this out for just a second, because you saw the Fiends go forward and kind of last second take the speed camp. It is a decision actually that you have to make whether you want to get that, whether you actually want to take the speed or not, because currently I don't know whether this is going to stay or not, but at the moment, if I'm LucifroN, I can scan over to the right side and say, oh, that camp's been taken. That's good news for me. I know where to go. I know what I need to deal with. So it matters more in Infernal versus Infernal, but it is still a little bit of information you can give your opponent on the map. As these Fiends on the other side, Nate, they're going to see everything that's happening, and maybe they can get some bobs too. It doesn't look likely though.
If it makes sense to consider the position of the hangar bay, especially in regards to when he uses the return function later on, it will go to your furthest out hangar bay. So it's really important to consider where you build those. So having it in that kind of high ground, secluded area in his main, it makes sense, but yeah, there's no wall off or anything. The depot has to be there for the solar habitat to power that up to get done faster. So getting in with the Fiends, getting the scout, not a problem at all. But can we say that we're surprised to see it's a Hornet opener anyway? No, not really. Go for the quick third denial. Gaunt's going to take forever to get down there. Just put on as much pressure as you can, and that's really about it. The Hornets are taking over today.
Yeah, they are. It's funny. I was talking to Theory a couple days ago, and for those of you who are not aware, he's not in this tournament. Unfortunately, he failed to qualify, but he has been one of the best Inferno players of the beta, of the previous playtests. He's won multiple community cups. But anyways, he was playing a ton of customs against another very good player called Albino, and his opinion is that actually, you know what, these Hornet openers are not necessarily broken, because again, I think the game is pretty balanced, but are probably the strongest way for Vanguard players to open up right now, because it gives you so much map control, it keeps things back, and it can just win the game if your opponent's not being careful. So Elazer, he's the big thing here, Nate. We saw in game one, Elazer could double expand off the Hornet opener, because again, Hornets don't really kill shrines all that quickly. There's no option to do that on this map. There's only really one nice and safe base you can take. You can try to take the more vertical one, but that's much more exposed. So Elazer, he's taking damage, yes, but there's less of a greedy option behind this to try to come back into it.
The pathways are a little less direct, right? Especially until the middle gets open, but we're not anywhere close to that point yet. And as that Hornet harass continues, like you were saying, we see a couple of the Fiends check over towards the third, but he just gets up a few of those Shroud Stones, and that seems to be enough to buy him the time. Of course, they can still tank a lot of that damage, and doesn't end up being too much of a big deal. But yeah, it's funny to see how that meta develops too, because I just don't feel like Infernal has that strong of an answer to it. If you open with Hornets, you're taking off the board probably one of the strongest openers that Infernal can do to you. If they go for the Doombringer opener, if they're trying to bring any kind of early pressure, especially anything where lots of the Fiends are coming through, you get to the Hornets fast enough, you get a little repair, you use the shield, you could deal with basically anything. It takes Spriggans off the table, and we know that Shadow Flyers kind of struggle to deal with them, so they naturally exist as just a great all-around starter. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you could play this, but if you open with Hedgehog, you go 2 Mech Bay Hedgehog and they're out on the map when the Doombringer shows up, you're gonna have a bad time.
Nate, let's be real, Spriggans take Spriggans off the table.
Yeah, Spriggans are. Can we just get some? Can we get like a mental health check on the Spriggans? Can anybody just let us know they're okay? We just want to send them some love. We have not. We're probably not going to see a tremendous amount of them outside of some funky transition, maybe some sort of bait play later on. If we get to the meta-gamey part, you know, I say that the Ultimate Caster thing earlier, we get some good games on this map of our 3 that we're playing on, and we'll get some repeats down the line too. So it is fun to consider that as well. Is there actually something that you could do to take advantage of the fact that everybody opens Hornets? I really don't know. I just don't know that the anti-air capabilities are that strong early on for the Infernals.
No, I think the play is you understand it and you get Shroud Stones up quickly enough so you take no damage, kind of you prep for that. And again, we see somehow this Doombringer of Elazer is finding his way through despite this line of Hornets that are trying to get damage done. So for the moment, nothing there. And there's a Vulcan in the main base. So look at what he's doing too. He attacks some of his units just to speed things up, and that should be a teleport back home. So nothing doing there, but that was still pretty cool. The attacking your own Hornets or attacking your own units with the Vulcan to speed up the attack. So by the time the drop goes down, the Gaunts get shredded. Didn't work out, but little micro things, right?
I'm looking forward to the eventual animation where it just, as it's firing, it just powers up and you can like see like the Super Saiyan aura or something around it, you know, and you can just get that that visual indicator of when it's reached the maximum damage. It's something that's super powerful. Again, one Vulcan can defend most anything like that. They really do not struggle with the Fiends or the Gaunts at all. Very tough units. That Doombringer, you mentioned it, comes back up now towards the north side, goes for the denial on this space. And this is where, of course, it is tricky. You do kind of have to commit here as soon as he goes back into the Doombringer. Once he's in the air, the Hornets are not going to let that get away. So does let the Gaunts just straight up fight, and we'll have to pull back and try to chase. So it looks like he was trying to chase the Doombringer up towards the north side, but that does mean that this base may not be able to finish it because they have the Vulcan over from the drop, and there you get to see the firepower of that boy. Okay, he's got 2 Vulcans now and also the med tag. So BeoMulf, I think we're going to see maybe a little nano swarm to juice those big boys up.
Yeah, the problem though is that was 4 or 5 Hornets, I think, going down, which are expensive, and again, a significant commitment in this early game. So yeah, the base stays alive, absolutely, but Elazer's trying to take the middle. That is 2 bases. It is by far the most important part of Secluded Grove. If you can get like 4 or 5 Shroud Stones around, you can get this Weaver opening forward, which, notice, by the way, Elazer opening Weavers, not Hellborn, because we've been seeing this mech transition out of LucifroN. If you can hold the position like this, it is very hard for the Vanguard player to break it down, because you just lash down the Atlases, you lash down the Vulcans, it becomes, again, this struggle. But if LucifroN can hit it before the Shroud Stones are ready, before the army's in position, that's probably going to be his best opportunity to try to break this down.
Yeah, we have the Bobs coming over to break the trees, so this is going to get opened up a little bit, but it will be a lot harder to take this once it's completely situated with Shroud Stones and the armies there. So this is a tight window. I don't know that he can really fight the army itself, but getting a cancel or shutdown on this base would be big. Let's see what happens. There is the Nanostorm coming in on one of the Vulcans, has them in the back. Lancers go forward for a tiny poke, but he is going to retreat. That is just a lot of Magmadons, and you pointed it out. He's got like, he's loving the Weavers, using it for the core, the high value unit isolation. You know, that Lancer can take a lot. You pull it directly into the middle of the whole army, maybe not so much.
Yeah. Shout out there to shout out to Theory and his Weaver love, and we're seeing that right there. I do like what's happened, by the way, from LucifroN as he gets this set up. It is a very thin choke that he's sticking his Vulcans into. It makes it very hard here to engage. And by the way, that's 75 Animus down the drain that Elazer just spent that really had no value to it. We're going to start to see the Abducts moving forward, and ideally the targets are the Medtechs, right? Or these Vulcans, these high priority units. But this concave that LucifroN has set up for himself, the Lancers are starting to go forward. The Vulcans are starting to get a little bit more damage done. And if he can continue to do this, it's going to be nice. But now we're going to see the Weavers drop forward a little bit, setting that concave up. But there's a shield on top of the one in the front. It's just not going to go down here. The Exo turret as well. But I think at the end of this position coming out of LucifroN is going to be forced to give it up once the shields go down. 10% damage off the top on all these Vulcans forces them back. And it was a nice push out of LucifroN, but I think he just stuck around a little bit too low. I mean, as I say that, it's only 4 Weavers remain. Atlases are going to, Lancers are going to try to get on top of all of these Gaunts. And for the moment, hey, you know what? Maybe he might be able to make it a little more happen here.
Yeah, it was such a tough fight because you're talking about how this army is still so powerful. There still has several of the Weavers alive, Magmadons in the back. The majority of the Gaunts are still there, but now it's turned into a force that the Exos can try to kite around a little bit more. He can do more of the poking and the prodding. There's still the big issue of he has the base. He's mining Ethereum. He has the Luminite. So over time, this position just kind of becomes better for him as he's going to leverage that economy into more forces to defend this center position. And we just haven't seen the tech get to that high level. The Vulcans have been big, but when they're in such low numbers, it's not that hard for the Weaver to just grab it. And he does try to get it away, maybe barely survives for half a second. But we're going to see Elazer continue to chase this army down in the field. Exos doing as much as they can to kite against these Magmadons. Brings out a couple of Bobs, actually, to fix that Vulcan up. Keeping that alive, clicking directly into the Gaunts would be great, but no, that one is going to die as well. Now being pushed up all the way back towards the third base. Weavers grab the Vulcan again, smash that down, no problem. Grabs the Medtech even. Everything that has value is going to be stripped off the walls, all right? Nothing left over, BeoMulf.
Yeah, and unfortunately here, as we look at the production, there are no solar habitats. There's nothing to really speed this up, so the reinforcing lines of our Infernal player are just going to hit just a little bit faster as, hey, we are starting to see some of these Weavers go down. They are expensive. They are slow. It takes a long time to bring them back into the fight. So a couple Bobs did fall, but now, again, we're going to see some Exos try to chase these down. Magmadons they're good, but they can absolutely be kited away by this. Lancer moves forward as well, fully procced on his passive. And we're not there yet, all right? Not for LucifroN, and certainly the Vulcans are almost starting to feel like a little bit of a mistake, and the Shroud goes down once again. The Magmadons are absolutely walking here. They're going to force everything back. Sim City that LucifroN has, Nate, is making it possible for him to fight. Now, I'm not saying the game's a good state for him, but it's really hard for Elazer to break him.
Well, Elazer went for the big chunky boys, and we all know that's where the Sim City starts to gain a little more value. It's a lot of range with a few big tanky units that go up front, and if they don't have a space to push, then the Gaunts don't have anything to buffer, and they can't really do their job. So we start to see the downside of the Weaver being so slow. Well, if you try to disengage with this unit, then things get a little bit tougher. It's going to try to go for the Infest Cloud again. But the other side of this, behind this, while the whole push was happening, Elazer did secure the Shroud Stone position. So not only does he have a little bit of a buffer for a counterattack, but it makes reinforcing a little bit easier too as he's going to come up. And this is, I feel, one of the things that really helps because he needs the Shroud. He needs the Shroud to keep getting the health up again. So bringing the Doombringer over with this to help support it, maybe make it a little easier to disengage with some of these guys would be nice, but I think I might just end up tanking a couple more shots on its way back before it dies. Very, very low, very close. Actually activates a couple of those stomps. Feels a little early there, BeoMulf.
This is actually a nice little bit of a timing for LucifroN. He just control clicked on all of the Magmadons, knocked them down, and said, yeah, trample here. It's going to be great. Unfortunately, that means they're not super viable, but when we have, what is this, 10 Shroud Stones plus a manifested one just sitting there on top, you can't fight that. So LucifroN's going to lose his entire north side here. Is just going to get totally shut down. And he's going to try to clear some of this up. Now, there's maybe an option if LucifroN can set up a nice concave as the army tries to run out of that secluded position, but luckily there are Magmadons, and they can just kind of clear up their own path if that's what they would like. And these bops are getting so very low. So now it's a three base Vanguard player who's got his fourth base on the right side. And if I'm going to criticize LucifroN for one thing, he committed so hard to trying to prevent the middle when he was already up a base. And realistically, yeah, the middle's two bases. Okay. Well, he was already up one. You just take the right side and your economy's even and you're not committed into this all-in position that he's been fighting against for so long now. And maybe you can play around it a little bit more. But he's going to try to chase these Weavers down. Once again, another one will fall down. The Magmadon walks, but again, very low when it starts. So it's actually just building a bit of a ready-made concave.
Yeah, the Dragon comes out too, so any of those infest units that we see going down just kind of creates a little bit heavier of a snowball effect, getting the extra fiends off of those. So while this push does continue, it's just so hard. It's a very technical, high micro sort of army from LucifroN, but he just doesn't have any of the heavy hitters or the AoE to take down the Gaunts in the back. So traded out quite a bit, but just not able to get it done. And Elazer going up 2-0 here. BeoMulf, just a good exercise of patience. Felt like maybe he almost overextended with the Weavers the first time, but didn't. It just seemed like getting the Shroud Stone lineup outside of that center base while he was attacking was just like the ultimate insurance policy.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. You and I follow multiple RTSs, and you don't always see those hard contains. They're a thing, they're in vogue sometimes, and they pop out. But it is kind of cool to see Elazer popping that in, taking advantage of that strong middle position and saying, okay, this is fine. You're not dead yet. You're dying. I'm going to put, you cannot leave this box. You talked about putting players in a box, Nate. Well, that is absolutely a box. There was no way that LucifroN was ever going to be able to go and get outside of that kind of three-base setup. So again, I think you don't attack into that spot on Secluded Grove. You play around the edges more. You take your bases on the side. You get drops going, because that big ball, that hard to attack into position in the middle, it just feels really hard for a Vanguard to break. Certainly without, say, Atlases or something.
Yeah, and that fight still took a long amount of time too. It's interesting to consider what could he have changed. I like that he had the Vulcans in the back. That's where we really saw the Weavers come into play, though. So maybe that's a situation where the Exo turret, as cool as it can seem, maybe having a medtech turret, get the extra heal, get the AOE heal buff on all the bio units, if that's going to be the majority of the army. I don't know. I liked the attempt on it, though. He tried to keep the choke point small, but that's the other side of it too. How did your infernal opponent get through the trees himself? He can use that to chase you down. So,
Yeah, it's interesting as well seeing this, because you talk to a bunch of infernal players and they're going to say, yeah, Magmadons are not great. You get a couple because they can stomp and they can mess things up, and certainly if you get a flank, they're really solid. But they just get relentlessly kited by the Exos. So you had the Weavers on top of it. You have this massive amount of stuff because, again, your opponent committed to trying to take down your two bases, and it didn't really work. So you make that happen. I think the thing that was interesting for me as we get back into Broken Crown pretty quickly for game number 3, Elazer didn't make a single Hellborn, or if he did, I kind of missed it, which has been
I
the
didn't
unit that
see
has
any.
been, yeah, it's been that power unit that we've been really seeing coming out of Inferno players for the most part, but not in Elazer's wheelhouse, I guess.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, especially because it really felt like the only way Elazer was going to lose that game was just from being kited to death with the Weavers. So the Weaver is such an interesting unit in that I don't believe it's been changed recently. So like you have that 10% max HP attack is what it does. So its damage kind of scales versus what it's fighting. So when you're in that point where you're getting the high value unit target isolation, then it's amazing. Get through the armor on all of the Vulcans, the Lancers, what have you. But if you're just trying to grab 1 or 2 exos when there's 7 or 8 of them kiting you, that's where it gets a little tricky. But Elazer exercising some patience, and I think turning around to go back for that base on the north side of where that fight was happening, and not let LucifroN have that economy was just huge. We're seeing very good decision making from him, and I'm wondering if we're going to see LucifroN change things up a little bit. Maybe he's recognizing that he's not able to get the value he's looking for out of the Hornet openers, even if he's applying pressure. I don't know, BeoMulf. I'd like to see some Atlases if I was going to be selfish, but I know that might be asking a lot.
I mean, against Mascon, it's pretty strong. But going back to the Weaver thought for a second, because there has been one major change to the Weaver in the last balance patch on the 13th. And that is that Weavers, yeah, they do 10% attack, but also their lash, instead of doing a flat 60 damage, it does 20% of the unit's HP. So Weavers can combo together, and they slap down Vulcans, they slap down Atlases in a really significant way. So you need to find ways as the Vanguard player to defend them or to go somewhere else. And that's kind of another reason why I think Bio is that this Bio ball that you can get into is maybe the stronger option late game. It's always going to be hard to tell. Hellborn are, of course, a little bit stronger, but Weavers don't do a whole lot of anything to Exos. They can put them out of position, but that's 1 Exo. And again, their percent HP counter matters less when the units have less HP.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, 10% of 45 is a very small number. That's 4.5 damage is not a tremendous amount, BeoMulf. But when you're grabbing the Vulcans and you're getting those veterancy tiered up, of course, the unit's not 45 health, but just making the point a little more clear. But yeah, the Weaver is kind of fun to see in that way. It's very clumsy, but when used, it's like one of the most surgical units that you can have. It just happens to move at a snail's pace. That's all.
It is, and on top of that, it's probably, look, Nate, I'm not an artist. I know when I enjoy things that are pretty or not pretty, but it's probably my favorite unit design. All right, you have this big, tall Cthulian horror, slouching towards whatever.
It evokes like a mental image of it in the distance, just like kind of lurching around, and you're like, I just don't want it to see me and grab me with whatever that thing and then eat me. I don't want that to happen, So you're getting somewhere. You're getting somewhere there towards developing what the fantasy or the lore of the game might be, right? We're learning. We're getting tidbits.
It's also a detector, which matters a ton because we obviously have a ton of invisible units in the game right now, but that does factor into what you're saying, Nate.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting to think about the roles some of the units like that have. Especially, you have the incredibly cheap detection too off of some of these units, like the Scout with getting vision and going around the map. But what will happen? What level of rage will we begin to see to understand when we put an invisible man in this game, though? That terrifies me, BeoMulf. Are people ready? Are people ready for an invisible man in Stormgate? I'm not sure.
I don't know, Nate. Despite all my rage, I'm still just a scout in a cage. Is how that's gonna go. But I do want to talk about what LucifroN is doing in this game number 3.
Yeah, probably a better conversation subject. I don't know if I want to imagine those horrors yet.
Yeah, but LucifroN is doing something very different in this game 3. We saw the big Hornet openers, and quite frankly, he wasn't getting enough damage done on the Hornet into the Vulcan drop. Seems to be the idea there. Instead, he went for a third base pretty much as soon as his natural was done. This is a incredibly greedy Vanguard player, and it's one of those things where you look at it, it's like, man, there's no way this works, right? The big hit coming in from Elazer surely is going to be too much to deal with, but I'm sure he's got some builds. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. The Doombringer, of course, is on the map. It's not as quick as Parting's Doombringer drop. It's moving across the map for 4:45, not 4 minutes. But the question now is, we see these sentry posts go down. Is LucifroN gonna have enough to defend this? Because again, he's been very greedy.
This is giving me Terran 3 Command Center vibes all over again. These kinds of builds, if it works, it feels amazing because you just have infinite money and you just crank out a ridiculous army that rolls over everything. But the other side is that you have nothing until that army is out. So immediately has to drop the overcharge, but a couple of the bobs were low enough that the fiends were still able to pop. So getting a bit of that early damage in, and now it's just going to turn and bouncing side to side. I do believe he has the buzzsaw turret at the 3rd, so that will be I feel like a reasonable deterrent for this. Maybe he'll try to land on the east side and just poke from max range. Yeah, and that's exactly what he's going to do. So buzz turret being tucked in a little bit there works against him with the gaunt drop.
Yeah, you can only really cover one side. Although I will say it is very nice that when the gaunt bounce range or the glaive axe, whatever it is, bounce range was nerfed from 5 to 3.5. It means you can't hit the command post and other units kind of get hit. So it does take a little bit of power off of the positions that this drop can find. But you know, at the end of the day, it's 2 bobs. It's not insane. LucifroN's doing a pretty good, solid job of defending against this. We of course have the Lancer upgrade, I'm pretty sure, because Biokinetics Lab is no longer researching, and well, there are no X's on the map. So that's going to be my assumption, that he has these really quick Lancers, these very tanky Lancers getting ready. And then where do we... Oh, he's going for a 4th base. This is so greedy, Nate.
It's amazing, too, because his answer to the drop has not been deal with the drop or do anything out of his way to deal with the drop. It's just been, yeah, I'm just doing my build, just trying not to take too much damage from the drop, and then I'm just going to be unbelievably greedy. So it almost feels like he wants to try to put Elazer into the position that he was in on the last game, where Elazer says, I have to do something about this economy, and then he overextends and makes that attack through the trees and dies. But that's not the level of patience that we've seen from him. Elazer's not he's not been in a rush at all. So he's been very methodical. He still has the Doombringer. He's been putting on a lot of pressure. It's going to be tough to get across the map with this thing constantly threatening. So we can see Elazer demonstrating really good understanding of what he needs to do here. But obviously LucifroN has not really been deterred in what he's done either. So 4 base Vanguard, lots of money, needs to win 3 games in a row. Let's see it. I'm all for it. I want to know how this one shakes up for him.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this. I'm seeing some people say that this is a build that's been showing up in the Discord. I've missed it, I guess, but it's pretty cool to see what's happening. And the other thing as well, this is a bio play, right? This is not a mech play. So while Weavers are good, they have 750 HP. It's another 125 white health if they're fully maxed. They can consume Fiends to get that white health back. They do a bunch of really good things. Against a bio play, they're not quite as effective because, you know, 10% on 150 HP is a whole lot less than 10% on 750 HP. The nuke is not, I mean, technically it's still 10%, but in the context of trying to nuke things down, not nearly as impactful. But the drop's going to go down. Once again, there's actually not a lot defending this ore line. So yeah, no, it's going to be fine. Some of the bobs get a little low, but that's going to be okay. And LucifroN's finally got an army on the map. It's going to be a recall. Is it going to get shut down? No!
Okay, well time. I really thought the Exo had a chance for one more shot there on it, but I guess not. Nice barely surviving maneuver. Some mini heart attack there.
Yeah, certainly. And we do have to point out, by the way, I don't know where the Animus... Oh, actually, I do. I know where the Animus is getting spent. There's not a lot of Animus on the field for Elazer right now. He's spending it all into his production to make sure that he has enough imps out, he has enough units out. Now we're going to see, of course, the Shroud is going to get manifested, which should force LucifroN back. But the position you're building into as the Vanguard player is, this push is nice, but you're pushing into 10 med techs and a ton of exos and adding on system shock as well, so you can clear the infest out and make sure your exos go. I'm not even sure what describes how fast they go, Nate, because it is, if you have the exo proxy or you have the exo passive proc and system shock's going, they're just about the fastest thing I've ever seen in an RTS game.
It is absolutely crazy. Just another reason why we love to see the good use of those med tags. And something else to keep in mind, even if it doesn't feel like there may be high value units too, the Lancers get charged up and buffed up throughout the fights as they gain those stacks. So if you can pull them in and isolate them, it's also worth keeping in mind that you're denying veterancy. If the units are trading a lot for Vanguard, then they're not utilizing a core component of what the faction even does, right? With regards to that. So you need to be trying to keep those units alive, trying to get good value for your harass, but not have your army get completely wiped every time, as that scaling is so important for them to win the longer fights. And I feel like what we're looking at again is a very heavily microed, fast army, talking about the Vanguard, the exo speed, but Elazer has just been quietly building a gigantic force, and we're just going to see him do 400 APM against 5 times his own supply and get run over.
Now, what I would love to see as well, and granted it is late game, it is not the easiest thing to get to, but we do need to start to see, I think, some Sentinels getting added in the next 5 minutes or so, once LucifroN gets maybe the last Therium double patch on the bottom side or something. Because, well, Sentinels are pretty awesome. Not only do they make you go faster if they have the upgrade, they can drop a missile on top of things. That means that your enemy units, they see less, they do less damage, they move slower. It is just this really powerful ability to take down a lot of power out of, say, the Hellborns in the back line, or take down power from these Weavers that are so impactful on the front line. And it really adds to the power of this Vanguard army. But for now, the high ground is going to be really nice. We're seeing every 16 seconds the Weaver's going to lash something. But, you know, 16 seconds, Nate, is a long time in the scale of an RTS.
Yes. Even though these fights, we're like, yeah, these fights take a bit longer than some of the other games. It's a little more drawn out, a little more cinematic, but also at the same time, yes, every tiny little detail still is so important, because at the level that we're seeing these guys play on, it does matter. Doombringer brought down on the south side, drops the Shroud Stone on the bottom of the cliff to help support the flank of the army. Lancers are kind of spreading out, trying to take some of those shots towards the north side of the army, but as they get chunked down, those soft exos are going to be forced to retreat. And again, Elazer crawling forward with the Shroud Stones, and every time those units are dying on that Shroud, that's giving Elazer that animus to continue to leverage those abilities forward. So it just feels like we're seeing, again, LucifroN trying to do something where he's going to have a strong start, either aggressively or economically, and Elazer playing a very patient, focused game. And perhaps BeoMulf, this is where maybe now we ask, are we going to see a couple of Hellborns mixed into this at some point? I see at least one there, 1 or 2 maybe, so we will have at least a couple this game.
Yeah, 3 is kind of the magic number you're looking for, because that, again, when you talk about level 3, level 4, or level 2, level 3 exos, yeah, you're not one-shotting, not easily. But 3 Hellborn one-shots an unupgraded exo, and that's kind of what you're looking at. What the problem is we have a bit of a low period for just a second. When we talk about Hellborns, Nate, they're a bit of an anti-micro unit that can be a little bit awkward if you're not used to dealing with them. Every single time you retarget a Hellborn, what happens is it resets the animation. And a Hellborn, their animation is incredibly slow. So ideally, you want to target the exos down, but you want to pre-target the exos. In the middle of a fight, they can be a little bit awkward to play around with. So that is certainly something that Elazer's going to have to deal with. But for now, every single base that LucifroN could possibly have, he has taken. He's well set up for it. The drop is being annoying, but there seem to be enough turrets set up. He's reacting just well enough, as both players are. Their economy is extremely well set up. So it does feel like for a Vanguard player, you want to see some tech transitions. He's going to take the fight right now. Shroud covers the map. Atlas shots are going to go down, but not getting a ton for the moment as the Magmadons just start to walk their way right on forward. But it's the ready-made concave that is so nice here. So despite 2% healing on everything is a really powerful idea for our Inferno player. The Vanguard just moves, and LucifroN moves so much further forward. The drop on the right side with the mass repair with everything else is just not doing a ton, and the shield on the Atlas as well. That thing is not dying anytime soon.
It's crazy. The Doombringer harass on the other side. Bob's repairing themselves, goes for the pull-in, trying to grab the Atlas from outside of where it was being dropped before the evac can get to it. There's the stomps coming through. And once again, a big push into a huge concave of Shroud Stones with the army. Seems to have been where LucifroN, I mean, those big powerful units of the army end up being the ones that are depleted. Still has a good amount of his exos alive, but we're not like, you really like the idea with the Atlas harass, but even in that very first fight, when the first or second time he dropped it, the Atlas ended up shooting his own army. It does do that friendly fire damage, so it's something to be mindful of if you're not manually targeting it. Now once again back into the main with the Doombringer, spawns a bunch of fiends. They're going to be able to continue that work in the natural, and we continue to see LucifroN trying to posture for a good fight, but Elazer is just playing the ultimate game of patience and harass.
I'm telling you, man, Sentinels are really needed here. But at the very least, we have your favorite unit. We got the evac that can drop some mines on top of things, and he is doing a really good job with these atlases of denying mining for just a little bit longer. Seems like the drop is it's not dealt with, but at least it's not getting any more damage done after that nice Therium hit. And in fact, this shrine is gonna bake down, it's gonna burn down, so that is a little bit less mining coming out of LucifroN or out of Elazer. And as we talk about economies, as this game does go later, Nate, 4 is the problem, right? Therium is the problem. This army that Elazer's making, you can build brutes, but they don't really do all that much in the late game. You can get an upgrade that makes them be a little bit tankier, but everything that Elazer wants, it needs to have Therium, and if you deny 2 patches out of it, well, it becomes very, very hard for our Infernal play.
Yeah, and trying to micro the fights in multiple different locations at the same time is not easy either. The Hellborn's in the back, trying to rain some shots. You were talking about they want to focus the Exos if they can, but the Lancers are going to continue to charge forward. Evac's going up towards the front, continuing to spot. Does still have that one Atlas moving. Goes for a couple of the abducts too. The Weaver's not able to get the Atlas quite yet. It's just stacking the Gaunts off to the side. 2 more reinforcing Atlas, I think, are coming across the map with this, so he's going to siege those up. And now you can really see that firepower get through. The Medtechs are in the back doing their thing. The Weaver's not particularly effective against the bio units, and just a couple of Atlas to help break down the static defense and kill those tanky forces. We can really see where LucifroN's army starts to gain some gas.
Oh, that Dragon is getting so low off the Hornets as well. It sucks up all the Infest. It was going to be fine for the moment, but this is desperation for Elazer right now. LucifroN's taking the base on the right side. That should be Elazer, and yes, these Atlases will fall, but there is so much damage that they have done. This Dragon, technically, Nate, it's alive, but only technically. It's not a mainline battle unit anymore. It's not easy to keep alive. You're going to try to dive it around and maybe get on top of a base and spawn a bunch of fiends and get some harassment there, but keeping this thing alive when you have so many Lancers and you have Hornets on top as well, so many options to snipe this down. As the Dragon now is just gonna fall down very quickly. Minus 500,
Best
minus
setup.
500. We got the meme. We're ready to go.
Minus 500, Rip Dragon, and now coming down, we've got 2 more Magmadons. They're going to try and stomp their way through here. We see the Shroud is starting to clear, however, and Atlas target firing the Hellborns in the back. Very, very important, as they're, of course, so slow, and you talk about that attack animation, that wind-up. It's not easy for them to try and dodge, and if they are dodging, they're definitely not getting damage done. So Elazer tapping out, and, well, we are not going to start our day off with a 3-0 here, BeoMulf.
Yeah, you know, despite the presence of a Nightfall infestation, we will not go gentle into that good night. Not yet, but Nate, there is an elephant in the room. As cool as that I guess economically aggressive build out of LucifroN was, it's now Elazer's map pick, and there are no bans. So Jagged Maw is 99% gonna be map 4.
We going Jagged?
I don't know
yet.
But
we landing Jagged, boys? Is that it?
I think we're landing Jagged. Again, we don't know yet, but waiting on confirmation on that. But I think that's pretty likely.
We just received confirmation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Our eye in the sky. Our eye in the sky has the deets. We are landing Jagged Maw for our next game. So, Godspeed, LucifroN. Let's see. What do the expectations have to be then? Hornets or?
Was it LucifroN, or I think it was LucifroN, right? The one base Hornet build that really handled
on this map. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm down for that. That seems like a pretty solid option. You wall off the main base, you use Hornets to snipe the catapult and say, hey, you've committed to this. You don't get anything.
I like it. I like playing against the meta of the map. Like the catapult is too strong to not take into consideration whatever you're going to do. Like if you want to play macro, if you want to play aggressive, it doesn't matter. You have to at some point be ready for that to either show up at your base in the middle out of nowhere, or you're fighting for it or contesting it or stealing it or what have you, or just defending it in general. So there's so many different ways to use it. I'm almost of the mind that's like, well, how many Hornets do you actually need to go and take the catapult camp as well, right? Like just completely taking it off of the board for them, or incorporating it into some sort of air push, since your opponent will obviously need a lot of gaunts. But you know, I can vamp my random ideas all day long here, BeoMulf, but I think we're loading into the game, so we'll be able to start this one soon and find out for ourselves.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen, because again, this map has been, I think Killer Pigeon said about 75% win rate for Infernals in the qualifiers. I think we've seen Vanguard win it once in the main event thus far. So it's a very strong Infernal map, but this is what you get. We're barely into beta right now. We're going to have broken maps, and as painful as that can possibly be, Nate, I do want to point out that I love how aggressive, I guess, how experimental the devs are being with these maps. I mean, every single map plays so very differently that it's kind of cool that we get to experiment with it. But Nate, it's a meat farm rush on the resource camp getting started pretty early here. So no, well, actually you can't drop a shroud stone this early, but no like immediate catapult rush.
Okay. Okay. Well, so we'll see how he goes there. As we see that, as you pointed out, they got the vault up over there. So for LucifroN, that is the question, though. Is it going to be that fast tech rush? Is it going to be the quick wall off of the main base and just trying to completely lock it down, make it difficult, or do we see him go for the macro play? We do have the 4 bobs headed to the natural, so indicating, okay. So it's on some level he has to consider, of course, what Elazer might do. But if there's a story for this series, like what really was the difference maker for him that he was able to finally win in this match? And it felt like he mixed in some of the higher tech, and those Atlases blew up pretty much all of the guns in that final fight, or at least before it. And he, of course, was able to amass a huge economy of exos, of medtechs, and all of that. But the 2 games that he lost, he just kept getting, kind of baited into pushing into those shroud stones and the concave, and just taking some of these trades where he never built up veterancy on his units. So does the LucifroN want to play that long game again? Can he play that on this map? Maybe it's too difficult for Elazer to get that push to him in that way. I'm kind of curious what you think about that, BeoMulf, because it's such an interesting problem to consider that maybe Elazer is just going to be a little more patient this game, and then LucifroN's just kind of stuck.
LucifroN just stole 25 Luminite out of Elazer's pocket by getting one of those goats, which is pretty fun. But I'm going to say that, so Jakima is a very strong Infernals map because of what it provides, because of this catapult push, or if you're really lucky, a 2 catapult push. That being said, what happens here is that the game goes very late. These imps or these fiends are going to start to get at least 1 bob, but the turret's going to be up pretty soon, so there should be a Lancer and probably going to be okay. This map, as the game goes later, actually kind of turns into a Vanguard map. And I know that seems weird because you're worried about the Doombringer drop and you're worried about the catapults, absolutely. But once it goes to like 4 or 5 bases, the spaces you can take a fight become so small. They become so very contested that, say, Atlas player, things like that, there's a tons of high grounds and low grounds you can play with, that it becomes a little bit harder for Infernals to take fights. So I think actually on this map in particular, that has to be LucifroN's play. He's going to want to go and try to extend this game as long as possible to make sure that he survives the scary portion, which is getting started right now. We're 3 minutes in, Siege Camp's getting kited out, and LucifroN thought about taking his, but Nate, I got news for you. You cannot take these creeps with just 1 Lancer.
No, absolutely not. As you can see, a lot of the tech here revolves around, it's control. It's a little bit of, it's like camp leashing mechanics. You've got that in MOBAs and stuff. It's not a completely foreign concept to some of these guys. So not maybe the games that we know Elazer and LucifroN from, but with a couple of ranged units, especially that damage over time that you get from the infest, just kind of helping to trickle it down. There's just a few things that work together with some tight control on these bad boys to clean it up, but you don't have the range out quite that fast for LucifroN. So let's see what he does. Is I think that that tier 2 base is getting set up for him, so we'll see the hangar bay, and there it is.
The question now, because this is a much later hangar bay than we saw in the previous time the LucifroN did this. This is 2 base Hornet, not 1 base Hornet. Is whether this is going to be fast enough to deal with this. Now, the Gaunt count is at 5. Well, yeah, is about 5 right now. A couple more are going to rally across. Some have taken damage. But the question is whether, A, we're going to have a Hornet up fast enough, and B, whether we're going to have multiple Hornets up fast enough to deal with this, because this push is happening right, Nate. It's happening right now. It is happening very fast, and I don't think there's a solar habitat as well to speed out our Hornet on the map. So this hit, this timing, this powerful timing is on the way right now, and LucifroN, quite honestly, he doesn't really seem ready for it.
No, Fiends are looking to split into the main mineral line, but there's a buzzsaw turret there, so it has to change direction. The expectation is probably that shield will pop up on the Hornet as it continues to get low, but actually just has to pull it back instead, so not quite as much pressure to deal with. Helps him get through the Lancer and gets a couple of more Fiends, and like you were saying, BeoMulf, it's a very tricky situation. Maybe you have the other Hornet out in not too much time, But what are you going to lose in the process of trying to get this defense going? Let's just see how it plays out. Does get one of them on the back. Catapult is going for the main base, but I think now with the 2 Hornets and the shield on the table, it should be enough for him to be able to shove it back. Of course, the Catapult still being annoying, and obviously worth pointing out that the barracks at the front of the wall was also destroyed, and we know that he's been building a lot of bio units, so maybe it's a minor nuisance to survive the Catapult build, but as soon as if he ever loses that air controller, that ability to swat it away, we kind of have to expect that he'll go for the other Catapult camp, because that's usually what ends up happening at some point.
Yeah, no, it is. I do appreciate, by the way, is we do see the Catapult finally dead. I do appreciate that he just let the Catapult do what it wanted to do, because it is far more impactful to chase down these brutes, to chase down these gaunts, to extract value from these Hornets than to just try to kill a Catapult, make sure you take a little bit less damage. And now, well, these gaunts are going to fall down once again, at least a couple of them. But actually, no, Elazer's doing a really nice job bunkering up there into the Doombringer, and eventually these units are going to get forced back home. And there's another attack on the way. That looks like a ton of Fiends that were all produced early on. They're going to try to dive in the main base, or maybe the natural Nate. There's no wall. Luckily, there's a Buzzsaw, and Buzzsaws are pretty good against Demon Fiends. Is that grounded in reality? I think that's grounded in reality. That's how that works.
Yeah, I think in fighting most small types of monsters, a chainsaw is generally accepted as one of the better solutions. So yeah, especially a giant one that you shoot out of a cannon. Feels reasonable enough. A couple of the extra barracks will go up, but there's no wall positioning, so they see these 2 Lancers and they say, yeah, I've got enough Fiends to clear these out, and that's a pretty huge pickup. Again, he's of course trying to, you can't really attack up because the Hornets are here, but he's still going to be ending up giving the Hornets XP for all of the Fiends that they kill, and then of course, they're going to make their way across the map again soon. So it's kind of interesting. You can't really go for the workers because of the Buzzsaws, but since there's no wall, any army units he builds, he also needs to be tucking away.
Now, the one nice, I mean, this is actually going to be, if he can chase these down, Fiends got buffed in their speed a little bit, so they're going to be able to get away. But if you can chase down these Fiends, I mean, that is a ton of XP that the Hornets can start to find, which, again, gives them that extra HP, that gives them that extra attack speed. But what I want to point out here is that LucifroN, by holding this push and by taking this bottom side base, which is generally, when I say generally, a little bit easier for the Vanguard player to take, he's on 4 Luminite patches. He can take the Therium on the north side for double Therium as well. And his economy, despite the fact here that we have, Elazer is taking the bottom side and taking his third base that way, the money from LucifroN is going to start to skyrocket here if the Elazer can't do something about it. So he's got Gaunts, he's got Fiends, he's got this drop ready to go to try to put pressure on it. But the Hornets are doing such a nice job of making that, yeah, okay, there are Gaunts that can run through the trees. There are Fiends that can run through the trees. It's a lot harder for the Brutes to do. They actually just can't. So you need the Doombringer for that. And Elazer, he's kind of acknowledging that he's going to have to be at home, and his economy is just not quite as good as our Vanguard players. Not at the moment.
No, it's been such an awkward situation. Does manage to get the Doombringer in the middle, but I feel like for Elazer, this is where the beginning of him taking that dominant stance always starts, is getting the forward Shroud Stones, making sure that every time LucifroN is going for a fight or taking any of the trades, that he's getting as much of the Animus as he can from it. And now we see LucifroN going to take that North Siege camp, but Elazer, he's got that big economy going. So with the double Luminite third base for LucifroN, it's not like there's no money there. But we've at least in this series, the only thing that we've been able to see him win with is getting to a point where he has a very big army that matches the size of Elazer's, because he hasn't won with the smaller unit counts, and that usually is also including some heavier teched up kind of play with the Atlas drops, I think, especially.
Well, we are starting to get there, right? We got med techs out. We have the Lancer upgrade. These Fiends are going to try to get on top. Yeah, that's a massive joke. And remember, unlike an Atlas, this Catapult does 0 friendly fire. It's just an effective power tool, and the shots are going to actually be pretty nice here. But the Vulcans, or the Lancers, are starting to go down. Even still, this push coming out of LucifroN, it seems like it's got some legs to it. I don't think you're going to, certainly not with the Shroudstone Manifest. I don't think you're going to be able to hold on that much longer. But if you can kill one of these Weavers, that's going to be pretty nice. Weavers shut down the Catapult. But, hey, it gets positive trades, although losing a Hornet is not, it's not a positive trade as much. You don't want to lose that one.
Super Shroudstone putting in work. He's actually just diving up on him right on this army. He does take down the Shroudstone, so Now making his way over towards some of the Weavers in the middle. I don't really know that he has quite enough to break through all of it. 2 of those Lancers are so low, but I guess he's so powered up right off the kinetic redirect. He's absolutely cleaving and weaving through these Weavers as they just don't have the support to help hold them together. A few more Gaunts are going to come out with the Shroud Stone on top of the cliff, but this is the conversation we were having is, can LucifroN walk away from these fights with more XP than he's trading away? And I feel like for that fight, the answer might be yes. And well, look at this. That's a beautiful image right there, BeoMulf. He's got cash money.
Well, you say that, but he's got more cash money than he actually can cash the money. 18 out of 12, you don't, this is not, say, StarCraft or something where you know, if you're over 16 workers, you're still mining some. No, anything over 12 mines, absolutely nothing. It's totally diminishing or diminished returns. So we would like to see LucifroN go and, you know, maybe even out his income just a little bit more, just a tiny bit more. But this army, again, Exos have their passive proc. We have that kinetic redirect as well, and every time you run forward, you kill off a Magmadon, maybe you knock a Weaver down, and it's effective, it's efficient. Time and time again, LucifroN is starting to get these trades, and by the way, he's got the north side base. His economy is going so much better than what Elazer's is. He's gonna have to kite back for the moment. He doesn't want to get infested. One Lancer does, but realistically, it tickles, certainly with the medtechs on top of it. And we're starting to see what we saw in that previous game, right? Where Elazer or LucifroN is starting to build this big economic advantage that's allowing him to trade effectively into this defensive Infernal players. The Magmadon, it walks through, but it never hits the Exos, and that's really what you're gunning for here. So further and further forward, LucifroN, he builds the bulkhead.
He's continuing to prevent Elazer from setting up this front that he wants to have. And if you think about it, it is the most direct path for the 2 players to engage. You have the high ground to take advantage of. It makes a lot of sense to have this set up. But for LucifroN, the most important thing he needs to do, as we've seen in this series, avoid the overextensions, retain the veterans, the Exos, don't trade out too much, because that economy, of course, he has a lot coming through, but like we see, you get a couple of those guys powered up, especially the Lancers, and we see how tanky they're able to become. So now encroaching upon Elazer's production, we do have the Shroudstone Summon on the top of the high ground once again, so continuing to add as much firepower into this as he can. Magmadon trying to stomp towards the front, get a little bit of stun action. Weaver goes for the pull, but it looks like LucifroN is doing a good job of maintaining this position. I just don't think he can push any further from where he is right now.
No, it's really hard to go through those Shroud Stones, and certainly the super Shroud Stone, right? That super turret on the high ground. It does a ton. But what LucifroN's doing here, on top of trading well and enforcing his economic advantages, now he's going to take the double base in the middle. So this map can eventually start to be totally split, totally mined out. And there's one base on the map, Nate, that first of all has got double Therium, which is incredibly important as the game goes later. But it also means that there's an uneven number of bases on the map. LucifroN, by taking that quickly, is going to build, I mean, he already has a pretty significant economic advantage by taking that double Luminite on the right side, but he's going to really start to develop this economic advantage that makes it so hard for Elazer to play with. And again, the other thing, Elazer's resources, Luminite, Therium, not great. He's spending tons of Animus to keep himself alive, which means there's not going to be a dragon for a while, although this drop on the left side starts to at least find something.
Yeah, it gets the base pick off. Fiend should be able to clear out the rest of it. The other expansion didn't have too much defense over it either. That Hellborn you were talking about on the high ground just saw it to cancel its windup about 2 or 3 times before it was able to get off a shot. So that attack animation, like you mentioned, is such a huge vulnerability of it. You need to have it able to just sit in the back, wail away on the Exos. But those Lancers are choking the army up very close. Magmadon trying to create some space with the stomp, but the Exos absolutely rip it to pieces. And there are so many med tags here. BeoMulf, the sustain, absolutely through the roof. Going for the Infest Cloud on the backside of the stun. The catapult is showing up too. Take your opponent's siege camp before you go for the big push. That's a way to get it done. Trying to tie things up here as we have a huge wave of brutes come through to try and help shut it down. Magmadon pushes through one more time. It is not going to be enough. And LucifroN, he still has, it feels like the army is so much smaller than what Elazer's got, but it's so much more impactful with those veteran units in the back.
I want to quote something that Demu and Pig said yesterday when you're trying to figure out how you think about these Exos. It's easy to say, man with gun, it's a Marine. That's a low supply unit. No. This is a Ghost. You're building a ton of Ghosts here. The value that you get out of them, yeah, sure, it looks smaller, but it is a very high supply unit. And you know, Nate, in the early game, I think last game we talked about how it really took the Atlas drop for this to start to move forward and start to be a win for LucifroN. Well, we're here on Jagged Maw. Why do you need to build atlases when you can farm them on the map? That's how that works.
That's a one way to do it. Elazer, GG's out, and we are taking our first series all the way to game number 5. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. So an absolute banger of a series to get us going here. And I think too, it can't be understated enough. Getting the third base as fast as he did on the double Luminite patches, just so much money. So much money, and you're right. The units, they look small, but it's not a 50 Luminite unit. You're paying some money for those exos, and they absolutely deliver, especially when they get the veterancy up. So really well done, and they cost a lot too. I don't know what my expectations are anymore. If we're looking for downsides out of what we've seen from Elazer's play or anything adjustment wise, the only thing that seemed to pop up was maybe just the Magmadons weren't doing too much against his stutter step micro, and maybe a couple more of the Hellborns if he could have. But I don't think I'm the infernal expert to come up with that solution, of course. But it's been very difficult to actually get those engages on top of that exo ball.
Yeah, I think if I'm Elazer right now, LucifroN has done a great job of adapting to how Elazer wants to play, which is very defensively, very macro. I'm trying to hit 300 supply and run across the map and do something. Well, okay, I'm going to take 4 bases really quickly if I'm LucifroN. That works out. So if I'm Elazer here, I think, again, I think maybe less Magmadons, more Hellborn. I think I want to adapt to what my opponent's army composition is, because he's been kind of playing the same composition for 4 games in a row. And I think the other thing I'd like to see, and this is not the easiest thing to pull off, and once the Vanguard army gets big enough, it can be a little hard. But one thing that we see players like Parting do, and other players we don't really see as much, the Flaming Imps, despite being nerfed, are still very strong. And if you get them into a Lancer line, they can blow them up, and suddenly the rest of it gets cleaned up. If you can get eight imps in a flank to go and get on top of the X's on the back line from a Doombringer or something, that can be intensely powerful. And yet, look, it's expensive, right? It's 25 Therium to blow one up, and if they don't connect, that's a lot. But it does give you kind of a splash from a different angle that can allow maybe a little bit more of a dissection of this bio ball that LucifroN is slowly getting. So yeah, more Hellborns, add some Flaming Imps. I think those are probably the 2 big changes I'd like to see. But Nate, it's gonna be Broken Crown again, 3rd time in this series as we move on to map 5.
Well, we've got 3 maps, so I don't think there's too much dancing around reality that we can do for it. This map is fairly straightforward, and we get good games here. People are mostly just going to complain about Jagged Maw, so I don't really find that too crazy. It definitely is a very different sort of animal to approach. But 3rd time's the charm. Agree with Guy in chat, and I'm very excited about how this one ends, because at first I was like, okay, Elazer just seems like he has this totally figured out, and there's nothing LucifroN can do. He's just kind of crawling forward, puts up the Shroud Stones on his most forward economic position, and then LucifroN just kind of meat grinders himself down. And then all of a sudden, LucifroN's like, well, I can mix it up a little bit, win with the Atlas, win without the Atlas, and playing very greedily, by the way, on that turnaround game too, is maybe the more interesting thing to consider. It was the game where he stopped going for the fast tech that everything changed. So I guess for him, that's the adjustment. Even worth pointing out, on Jagged Maw, I still went for that fast command post in the natural.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense against a lot of, say against a player like Parting, who's trying to end the game and hit a timing. Yeah, going for this aggressive option that we're seeing out of LucifroN is a big deal. But in a game where it's just a very defensive player, play greedy, play up to them, play counter to the player, not just how ladder's going. So now, Nate, we're into game 5. LucifroN, of course, in the blue bottom side, Elazer in the red top side. We talked a lot about the adaptations, but as we move into game 5, do we see that greed from LucifroN again?
That's my big question, because if the games that he's tried to be aggressive, the games where we've all been shock and awe, wow, he's killing imps, he's getting the early kills on the guns, it feels like he's just flying high. And then he just doesn't actually get to the meat and potatoes part of the economy and macro phase where the army ever gets big enough to actually break Elazer. So we talked about this, you mentioned it, but you're not getting extra value from going above 12 workers on the Luminite. And that's kind of the thing, is you don't need as many to be getting the full value. So the impact of the worker harass isn't quite the same as in a game like StarCraft. So you definitely are prioritizing different aspects of what you want to be targeting with that harass, whether it's getting the worker kills, killing parts of the army, or just denying their move outs. So For LucifroN, it's been switching into the very heavy economy, and yeah, we're not surprised to see him go for that early on. I don't think.
One of the most annoying, you talk about worker harass, one of the by far the most annoying things is notice this gun just stays on shroud, so the dog will not kill it. One of the most annoying things that you can do as a scout player, as a Vanguard player, is that almost all the buildings, all the buildings are at least 2 by 2 for the van or for the Infernal, like 2 boxes by 2 boxes. So it is very easy for the Vanguard player to just prevent your imp from dropping something, even dropping a meat farm. So that can be obnoxious. You can just kind of stay on top of it and go from there. But for now, quick expand coming out of Elazer, quick expand coming out of LucifroN. So LucifroN, last game, he took his third base right around 330 or so, which is faster even than kind of the standard Infernal expansion pattern. But for now, no, okay, I guess we're not going to see that. It's going to be a Hornet opener once again. Not quite the same amount of greed we saw in Game 3.
Yeah, and if we're trying to think about the why, I mean, this map, at least, natural to natural distance by air, very short. The Luminite patch in the natural is very outwardly exposed, so it might feel it's a little easier to get the value that he'd be looking for out of that kind of harass, and then it's mostly just a choice of bouncing to the left or the right side, but that middle is always going to be an option, so I don't hate it. We just haven't seen LucifroN been able to close out the dub from this opening yet. So we had a little bit more of it last game eventually, but that's going to be the big question then. Is it a couple of Hornets into that fast third? There's obviously not a double base available like there was on Jagged Maw, so I can't believe it. I found a downside to him not being on Jagged Maw as a Vanguard player, but there it is. So maybe it's a little harder for him to snowball that mid-game army, and that's why he's going to definitely still stay on the harass focus to start.
Yeah, the thing that I am paying attention to here, so the reason I don't like the Hornet build, it's still strong obviously, and it's killing a lot of Inferno players on ladder, but the reason I'm less of a fan of it here is, again, Hornets don't kill shrines all that quickly. So Elazer, we saw what he did last game. The moment the Hornet shows up, he double expands, says, this is fine, you know what, I'm gonna suffer this. It's like playing Zerg versus Phoenix in StarCraft 2. You're like, you know what, I'm gonna lose some stuff, but I'm just going to build the hell out of my economy because you aren't really gonna kill things all that quickly. But for now, the Gaunts, they're going to get some fiends out. They're going to start to scatter around a little bit. LucifroN, again, no third base on the way. But do we have a greater shrine? Is this going to be like a 430 Doombringer drop coming out of Elazer? Or does he also have something a little bit different in the works?
He's got quite a few Gaunts. I mean, the double Conclave Open gives him pretty tremendous power to answer against this, but it always boils down to the same thing, which is the Vanguard player will use the shield and they're going to get value for the first move out. They're going to pick off at least 1 or 2 of your Gaunts or some of your imps, get the EXP rolling, and then the other side of it too, knowing what's going on, right? Getting the read on whether that shrine gets upgraded or if it is going to be... I mean, Doombringer kind of feels like it's too good to not ever... Like, I don't think you can ever just completely wave it off, because at any point it can be the thing that loses you a game. Like, you can't just pretend like, oh yeah, they're just not going to do it at all. But knowing whether it's in there for that opener is certainly also a very important part of reading this matchup.
Yeah, you know, I'm getting a little bit worried about LucifroN right now when we talk about how to read the matchup, how to develop yourself into this game, because again, this is double shrine from Elazer. He's got 4 bases. LucifroN is... Wait, LucifroN's double expanding too? Look at that. We can see Bob's on the bottom side chasing a fiend around, but he's dropping double command posts. Top side and bottom side.
Here we go.
Will go down. So, hey, take advantage of the space. You know Elazer's not going to get too aggressive. Play greedy and expand, or play aggressive and play greedy behind it.
My third base doesn't have double Luminite. Guess I'll just have to take 2 Luminite then. So taking things into his own hands here, and this has been the method for the success so far. The greedier LucifroN has been in this series, the better he's done. Which feels like a very strange thing to say when you consider that Elazer's hit some pretty sharp attacks, but that's just the evolution of this matchup right now. The Hornet feels pretty uncontestable early on, so incorporating that and then getting economic and greedy and then going into your macro plan just feels like a very, very good strategy at the moment. LucifroN just executing that at an increasingly better pace, I guess, every game since we went from being down 0-2 to making it to the final map.
And you know, Nate, as we look at this entire day happening, and I guess we include the Katowice qualifier yesterday as well, my favorite part about this tournament and watching this develop is seeing meta develop in real time. Sometimes we see this in other RTS as well, but because this game is so new, you know, there was a balance patch literally 4 days ago. The fact that we can go and say, yeah, okay, or players like Clem, who haven't played a ton in this patch, but were very good in previous patches, as they sit here and they figure out what's good, what's not good, how can I play against my opponent. It's really interesting to see, but for right now, there's no static defense on this Aegon drop at the 4th base. The LucifroN has been very greedy. He's going to get punished for it just a little bit, but only going to lose about 2 bobs. You're going to turn into fiends. The base won't go down for the time being, and as long as you can sustain this, it's kind of okay, because again, the greed is there. There's a Hornet that's going to retreat back home. Gaunts are going to try to snipe it down, but there's a shield right there. So yeah, no, that's not going to work. And this is damage, substantive damage on the Doombreaker, and this Hornet will eventually go down. You got to assume. Maybe return to hangar? Oh yeah, it's going to go right back just in time. So eventually, it feels like there should be a solution to this, but it is annoying for now.
This is what makes this drop so good, because he has the ability to, and actually starts the recall and then loads the gaunts up after. So he was kind of trying to see if he could get one more last shot off. But that's what makes that gaunt drop so good, right? Just the fact that, yeah, the shield is a problem, but when you have 8 gaunts hitting them, usually they're not gonna drop the shield at full health. So you're kind of playing with it a little bit. You want them to try and get you and hope that you won't press the button in time, but sometimes it just ends up like that. So good amount of harass, but it's a reminder that because LucifroN double expanded, yes, that expansion took a couple of bob hits, but the one on the left side, he hasn't been touched during this. He's still on 4 bases, even if he took a little bit of a hit, but it doesn't feel like he's economically lost too much. The only thing I feel like is missing at the moment is just continuing to ramp up the production as that money rolls in.
Yeah, I think so. I'm almost in this position where I would like to see the 5th base get taken by LucifroN on the right side and just, again, commit to that greed, because look at how Elazer's playing. He's taking that 5th base very quickly. He's the one that's really playing here into this late game. I'm sure he's got a gun drop, but that's just about it. And in part, that's how the race works, right? You have, I mean, Nate, do we want to break out a stopwatch and see just how long it's going to take for Weavers to run on the other side of the map? Like, if you're going to attack with this army, you have to be 100% sure you're going to win the game with it, either with the army itself or with reinforcements, because Hellborn are incredibly slow. Weavers are even slower, but right now we're going to see the Doombringer get caught out just a little bit, but Exos can't bring enough damage and going to stay alive.
Coda lost that very quickly, gets out just in the nick of time, and I do like what you're pointing out too, though, because that has been the big question: is where does the tech go? What units does he actually invest into? Do we see Hellborns manage to land some hits on the Exos? He made 1 or 2, but they didn't end up getting to do a whole lot on Jagged Maw. So how much can he really get away with? Looks like he's trying to bring that one back with the recall, and he does so. So Resource Camp is going to get grabbed by Lucy and continuing to hold that map control. But I like what you mentioned about the Weavers. You can zoom in pretty nicely on them, and they're so big. At some point, I hope if you fully zoom in on a slow-moving Weaver, especially off Shroud, right? It's got to have like some sort of cinematic music, maybe a little National Geographic something. There's got to be something non-licensed out there that's just like the sound of like grass blowing in the wind when you look at these guys. So majestic.
Here we see the tall striding Weaver in its natural habitat. I cannot do a David Attenborough voice. It's fine.
Searching for something to sink its. I don't know. I don't really know what it uses to do the pull ability. So I don't know. So like a claw, a tentacle, or is it tongue? I don't know if I have enough lore information to complete the segment. But he's gonna push into them anyway. Does try to get a couple of pulls, and we see the Flame on Imps from the side going for a little flank action. It does burn, crisps the edge of the bio ball, but not enough to completely take it down. Going to pull in a few more units there. We see getting pulled into the explosions is not a fun spot either. Weaver trying to get away, not able to regen the one on the left side. There's still 2 more on the right. Pulls in an Exo, pulls in again, and hey, that's a way to guarantee a little bit of value. If anything, there's some questions about how much they can tank. It's got to be so difficult to try and get any sort of manual target fire onto the Gaunts in this sort of situation. So it's a huge front line that helps a little bit with the peel by pulling in the units one by one. So I like it. We've seen this though. We've seen this fail the last big game, the last macro game. He just wasn't quite able to get it done, Beo. So what's the secret sauce to make it work? LucifroN is just putting huge pressure on once again.
I mean, the big difference here, we saw that already happen, is that Imps can explode now. Elazer didn't get that last time in this drop. Man, some of these Gaunts are so low. But LucifroN's going to be a little bit slow to it because he's dealing with the Magmadons walking forward. I think Pig and Demus, the Rodidons? I don't know if that's lore accurate or not. Anyways.
They're kind of like a Stegosaurus with a hammerhead shark head. That's my personal opinion, though. So You know,
Yeah,
not representing EGCTV's official opinions on what exactly the Magmadon is. I would hate to presume such a thing.
I always get the feeling that they're like just an angry New York man, you know, from Seinfeld. You know, I'm walking here. You know, it's a good quote.
Yeah, you got a problem
regardless
with
of what
that?
it is. Sorry.
No, sorry. I was yeah, I'm from New York, so that's just a funny joke for me. I appreciate you though, babe.
You're welcome, Nate. This is I did my research before this cast because I really knew that I was going to be working with you today up until about 5 minutes before the broadcast started.
Yeah, that's true.
I did all my prep for it, and you know, like, he's from New York. Let me bring as many
Gotta get a
Seinfeld
zinger in
references as
there.
possible.
Yeah. And when they lose, you just say, "Oh, it's just like the Jets. You're familiar with this, right?" And then I cry and say yes, and everybody in chat says, "Please move on." So it's beautiful. It's great. It's a great day. It's how I like to spend my Saturdays. Goes for the Infest Cloud. Not going to be able to get most of the army, but LucifroN, that's that awareness that he's had, and he's taken all of the bases on his side of the map too. Just shout out to him. Playing big macro while constantly staying in Elazer's face. It feels so tough for him to move out. Especially feels like the Magmadon stomps have not been super staggered. Just a really difficult way to fight. It seems to be that for Elazer, it's all head-to-head, and the closest we had to the closest thing that we had to a win for him so far. We're seeing a little bit of it now, but that vision turret becomes a huge deal. Trying to get the flame on, especially from the side. It actually does get a huge detonation, about half the army eradicated. Well, that's what I was about to say, BeoMulf. I was looking for the flanks. I wanted to see a little action, a little sauce on the side, and we finally get it. Beautiful play out of Elazer, and LucifroN gonna have to think twice about getting so close next time.
Yeah, LucifroN, unfortunately, I guess he was looking somewhere else at the moment, but his entire army runs into what is perhaps the worst possible position to put your army into, and he loses a lot of it. And, you know, look, Nate, in general, time to kill in Stormgate is pretty low, but 10 flaming imps on top of your army is kind of the one exception to that.
Yeah, there's you know, we like a little bit of terrible damage, shall we say. But for the Magmadon's coming in here again, trying to push this army back one more time in the middle of the map. Some people in chat were asking, but the upgrade you can get, your imps, your workers for the Infernal can turn into basically live bombs that just run into the enemy. So you can't just make a bunch of them and hold them. When you press the button to turn them into the exploding unit, you are immediately putting a timer on how long that unit is going to live. So it's a little bit more strategical in terms of when you decide to use them. You can't bank them up, so it's not to the same degree of just like having so, you know, quote unquote, so many banelings, but it's definitely a very powerful unit when used correctly.
Yeah, it's certainly hard to make those connections as well if the Vanguard player is paying attention. They get targeted down very fast. But I think what we're seeing here out of Elazer is that the last two games have been LucifroN developing his tech more, building a better army against what his opponent is doing. And now Elazer's going one step further and building the army that is good against what LucifroN's been doing these last couple games. So the Atlases are going to start to join the fray here. That large amount of splash damage is the thing. Notice he targets the Weavers down first because, again, does not want to get lashed on top. And juicy shots are going to hit, but they're not on the Gaunt just yet. Splits on the Imps as well is going to keep most of these Exos alive. But the reinforcing line coming out of Elazer right now, the Hellborn and the Gaunts and the Weavers and everything else, is slowly worrying away at this army. And this one Atlas, despite sitting here and being untouched, mate, it's targeting the Shroud Stone that's being made. It's not doing damage to the army.
Oh, this is one of those situations again where LucifroN, some of the positional things that he did, I really liked. We see the Atlas basically being the anchor to this, helping to hold it down, still having most of the medtechs earlier too. But he had the turret set up with the medtech inside of it for the beginning of the fight, gave himself a lot of time to pump out this second wave of reinforcements behind. And the other thing we're seeing too, as the Doombringer comes forward to spread the Shroud to help out, as the Dragon comes in now too, was those Hellborns. But the front line being gone makes them exposed. There is a Shroud Stone on the high ground. However, there's the Dragon Breath onto the rest of them, and LucifroN will be forced back again. Dragon target firing the Atlas on the high ground too. Bob's pulled to repair though. LucifroN, he's on top of it.
That he is, but this army is getting much, much smaller. Of course, Infest on top of everything now means even more Fiends get spawned because the Dragon's right there. And if LucifroN loses this base on the north side, that's where it's going to start to get really, really painful. So we see the Doombringer again, runs forward. I think it deposited something maybe. but we've lost the tech of LucifroN's army. There's like 2 Atlases on the high ground. They're getting good shots. Bobs are going to run away, but this is where the Dragon loves to play. The Bobs, they can repair themselves kind of, but they don't really do a lot. This is going to be a ton of Fiends here. Really, no
Dragon does a
anti-air.
lot of damage too.
It does.
It's great at breaking a position like this. Just terrifying. Nothing but workers and 1 turret against the Dragon. You are going to have a bad time. Not really moving it away though as the rest of the Exos catch up. Just, you know, you don't want to lose it. It's not cheap.
Exos can pop it. I've lost more than 1 game because I didn't realize just how much damage Exos do to my Dragon. But the problem is now there are fiends in the main base. They're getting spawned out. This position from Elazer is just slowly moving forward, and the dearth of tech that we have coming out of LucifroN here, it feels really hard for him to break this open. Again, the Magmadons are going to start to shove in. They just force you to the kite backwards, and that allows the Hellborn to establish a better position. That allows the Hellborn to run forward. A Hornet has been made, and you know, a Hornet is a solid anti-air option, but Nate, is it enough? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, if he had rolled up with like 5 or 6 of them out of nowhere, that's one thing. He's getting a little bit of veterancy, but the other problem too is that he's still getting harassed on the west side as we get beautiful demonstration by our observer. The Magmadon's trying to hit the southern Luminite pads, and that infests so low the health on those Vanguard units. I'm just looking at that Hornet. I was like, yeah, 1's not going to be enough, but 0 will definitely be less than enough. He is just absolutely getting run over. What's here other than the medtech? See, like 2 Lancers, another one coming down the ramp, but his whole 3rd has been turned into Fiends. His 4th is about to be Fiends, and Elazer potentially shutting down what could have been the coolest comeback we would get. But perhaps somebody else will compete for that later down the line. What a way for Elazer to close things out in that series, though.
You know, Nate, I am so happy that we saw 5 games. Please give me 3 more of that series. I am not going to complain, but I think it's not just me and you that get to talk about the series. Now we got Killer Pigeon on his way back to tell us just how bad my David Attenborough impression was.
We're going to have to work for this. And here we see, you got to really get that pretentious side going, BeoMulf. But here we see them extend it. No, I'm not going to go the whole length because you know what? This series went the whole length. It's already a guarantee, and we're going to be going deep in the day. What delivery we got midway through that series. Let's break it down game by game because I think we can actually kind of compartmentalize the first 2 here, right, Nate? I felt like game 1 and game 2, it almost looked like Lucy had tripped over himself, like he had this perfect build order. Elazer sold for it. I don't know about you, but I thought we were heading for a quick 3-0.
Yeah, it really seemed like Elazer just had a total read on the Hornet meta. We saw so many workers get killed in the first game. The harass was really crazy out of LucifroN. We're talking him up, and then all of a sudden we realize, oh, he didn't focus quite as much on his economy as Elazer did, and he just ended up getting completely rolled over 2 games in a row. And there was a little bit of that back and forth on Secluded Grove, but Elazer really demonstrated in this series overall just patience, using the Shroud Stones to cover those positions, not going too far away from them, even in that final map. But just you know, LucifroN just seemed like he had kind of underestimated or was maybe a little overconfident with just how aggressive he was in those first 2 games.
And I think the thing that we like to see is that the stubbornness seemed to evaporate away, BeoMulf. That 3rd game, a really big eye-opener, game changer from Lucy. You know, he did start with something a little bit similar, then immediately decided that greed would be the correct approach. The Bioball looked pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna take 3 command posts almost before you got a barracks. It's gonna be, you're gonna have a lot of money. That allows you to get into that position where you have Lancers and you have Exos and you've got Medtechs and you got Atlases later on, and you have this fully set up, this fully developed army composition to deal with what Elazer's going for. And that certainly brought him into game 3. And also that meant that he is the first no, I guess technically he did win earlier on, but it seems like he's the only Vanguard player right now that properly knows how to handle Jagged Maw as well.
That's true. Game 4, I thought he was going to go for the, what did I coin it? I coined it the lock the door, I ain't coming out build. Didn't do it this time around. I'm wondering, Nate, was that kind of this idea of, I like to call it hand representation, right? Is like, obviously, that game would have been witnessed by his opponent. Elazer would have been watching the previous win against Killers on that map. Do you think that's maybe why we didn't see the exact same build from LucifroN again?
I was wondering that myself because was it going to be the double bluff? It was such a fun strategy to watch him use earlier, and it's like a question now because how people are playing Jagged Maw. Are you just going to try and fight the tides of the catapults? Are you going to go for a strategical, just straight up blind counter to it? But for me, the biggest thing that stood out there was that LucifroN realized that being greedy was the key to his success. And I like that he dials in on that because he goes for the quick command post. It was the only thing he didn't do in the games that he lost, right? We saw him be a little more aggressive. We saw him try to go for those earlier setups. So I think that just focusing on making sure he had the economy to build that force and not lose, not overextend really. He kind of matched Elazer's patience towards the end, but Elazer seemed like he had kind of dialed things in.
Now, speaking of those bluffs, I'm wondering if that maybe felt like it gave a little bit of an edge to Elazer in game number 5, BeoMulf, right? Because we saw the Hornet opening again. We did see a quick hop away into mass greed from Lucy, but I guess my brain's kind of racking this idea. If he went for that greed a little bit quicker, could he have reached his peak fast enough to shut down the Infernals?
Honestly, I think LucifroN was in a great position in that game up until one moment. He's not looking, he's not paying attention. His entire bio ball goes right into the Therium line on the north side, and like 5 or 6 flaming imps blow up 70% of it. And it's like he was pushing really well. He had his economy set up here. He had the tempo, and then it really, really didn't work out. But I'm being told that we got to get ready for our second game because LucifroN may be out, Killer Pigeon, but his brother is still in.